The irony of all of this, by the way, is that as the libs are pretending that I called for mass murder, a very prominent liberal went on national television and literally called for murder.
We have experienced many decades now of having agency over our body, of being able to determine when and how many children to have. We know what that feels like. We know what that's done for our lives. We're not going back. I don't care what the laws are. We're not going back.
I think the women will rise up.
That's the activist.
That's Jane
speaking, and she probably will get a Nobel Prize.
But it's the truth.
Very soon.
It is the truth. We're not going to do it.
Besides marching and protesting, what else do you suggest?
Well, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not a miraculous. What did you say?
Murder.
She's kidding. Wait a second. She's just kidding.
Don't say that. That's
you don't know. They'll pick up on that and just run with it.
That's the worst.
She's just kidding.
Well, let me talk to you about. Let's move on and talk about Jane's activism, which is legendary.
Oh, she's just kidding. She's just kidding. You look at Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda is not kidding at all. There's not even the hint of a theatrical kind of smile or wink here. She is dead serious, which tells you a lot about the left. Tells you two things in particular. One, when they whine and cry and clutch their pearls and completely rewrite your words to make it sound as though you're advocating violence when you've never done any such thing, it's completely disingenuous. And it's completely disingenuous because of the second point, which is that the libs would happily advocate political violence against their enemies. The libs have made this point all week with my transgenderism comments. They said, you can't distinguish between an idea and the people who express that idea. There's no distinction to be made. If you criticize a bad idea, then you are calling for the death of the people who hold that idea, which is absurd. Anybody with even a slightly developed rational faculty is able to distinguish between bad ideas and people who believe bad ideas. But the libs don't fall into that group. The libs truly make no distinction between those things. And so when the libs are calling for the eradication of an idea, they actually are, certainly in the case of Jane Fonda here, calling for the eradication of people. It's sometimes said that every accusation from the libs is a confession. And Jane Fonda just confessed something. Confessed that this whole past week of the libs rewriting my words is because they themselves make no such distinction between ideas and people. We're a few months early here, but I'm prepared to bring this out now. Got to give a hat tip to Jack Posobiec for calling my attention to this. June 21st, 2018. Greta Thunberg, Saint Greta of the Blessed Sailboat, tweets out, a top climate scientist is warning that climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years. Greta has apparently deleted this tweet. I'm just going to look at my calculations here. It's 2018, now it's 2023. Carry the 7. Oh, it's been 5 years. Almost, it's been 4 years and 9 months? We are approaching the end of the world, aren't we? And yet, the behavior of people might seem to predict the end of the world, but the natural facts of the earth seem just fine. Another doomsday prophecy has not come true, as all the rest of the doomsday prophecies have not come true. This is what the libs always do. They tell you that in 12 years, 10 years, 5 years, the world is going to end unless you do exactly what they demand that you do, unless you give them all the money and all the power, and then maybe we'll avert the end of the world. And then those prophecies never come true. But they're so far into the future that the libs assume that you'll never call them out when they don't come true. This has been the case since all of human history, but it goes back to the population bomb. Paul Ehrlich in the population bomb said in 1970 that within 10 years, there would be mass famines, the world population would plummet, it was inevitable. We could start now sterilizing people and killing babies through abortion, and we might need to even coerce it, but it's still not going to help all that much. These predictions led directly to policies in places like India, which sterilized lots of poor people in exchange for the use of utilities. Places like China, which had the one-child policy, killed untold numbers of babies because of these sorts of predictions, and then didn't come true. Didn't matter. Actually, 50 years on, the world population doubled, malnutrition was in an all-time low. Oops, got it wrong. It's always wrong. It's all these predictions about climate change, about the population bomb, about the end of the world, they're always false, and it's important to celebrate when they don't come true. Shouldn't we be happy? Shouldn't Greta be happy? Why doesn't Greta retweet this and say, hello, how wonderful, I don't really know how the Swedes sound. Don't you know, this is so wonderful. The world hasn't ended, yippee, hooray. No, they're upset when it doesn't happen. They hide it. They have to delete it. They say, my calculations were a little wrong, but 3 more years if you don't give me what I want. 3 more years, that's when the world is going to end. Okay, see you in 3 more years. What's the point of all this? The energy secretary for Joe Biden explained what the point of all of this is.
I think China has been very sensitive and has actually invested a lot in their solutions to achieve their goals. So we're hopeful that, we can all learn from what China is doing, but the amount of money that they're investing in clean energy is actually, encouraging.
There it is. There's the point. The point is to make our system of government look more like China's. It's not just Jennifer Granholm and the Biden administration who's saying this. The World Economic Forum has been saying this. The liberal elites all over the world have been saying this. They look at China's model and they say, oh, that's a pretty good way for the elite to take a lot of power over the people. What's the model? The model is mass surveillance. The model is a social credit system. And the model is the total control of people's habits of living, all the way down to what kind of stoves they use to heat their pots of gruel, all the way down to what kind of transportation they're allowed to take, whether or not they're able to leave their homes, all the way down. And how do they justify it? They justify it in the name of this eschatology of climate change, this woke pseudo-religion that has all of the elements of a religion, all of the kind of quasi-sacraments, all of the kinds of rituals, all the kinds of liturgical garments, and of course, the end times prophecies. That climate change exists to animate this move away from our traditional way of life toward this new way of life. And it's not just that this new way of life is communist. It's not just that China is a purely communist country. It's not. China uses market mechanisms. China, I don't think Xi Jinping is the most ideologically orthodox Marxist that's ever lived. And frankly, I don't think that their system is all that different from the system in the West. We have the same kind of mass surveillance that China does. In fact, we have a much more sophisticated system of mass surveillance that we use against our own people. We have a social credit system, whether the United States wants to admit it or not. If you contradict the ruling regime, you can have your Uber shut down, you can be put on a no-fly list, you can be debanked. This has happened to political dissidents in the United States. And because our society is increasingly moving away from cash, you can be frozen out of the system, out of the financial system. You won't be able to protest either because you'll be deplatformed from social media, which is the public square. Doesn't look all that different. So when the ruling class liberals tell you, we want to look like China, believe them. They're telling you their plans. And you're even seeing this impulse in the way they use language. The idea that in the total state, in a totalitarian regime, everything down to your private thoughts is controlled by the ruling power. The words that you are allowed to use, history, what actually happened, what people actually said, no, you didn't hear that. No, you didn't see that. No. History is always changing. Reality is always changing. The party, whatever the party says, is always right. It's Music Monday, baby. The rest of the show continues now. You don't want to miss it. Become a member right now if you're not already a member. dailywire.com/Knowles. Use code Knowles at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans.